Wolves 1, Chelsea 3. Now, this was another impressive performance from Chelsea, and I think the game was pretty much over in the first half. So let's focus our analysis mostly on that first half. Now, there are a few things that I was quite impressed with his approach to the game. To start with, I think that we are starting to see what Rosinho's preferred lineup at the back for Chelsea is. I think Fofana and Chaloba has to be his first choice centre back pairing, and then Cucurella and probably Gusto and maybe Reece James if he's fit. We've gotten the hang of that. And then in midfield as well, his preferred pivot seems to be Santos and Caicedo. I think we've seen enough to make that conclusion now. But I'm going to talk about Fofana a little bit and then about the relationship between Neto and Gusto on that far side. But basically, let's just look at what happened in this game tactically. Now, Chelsea started this game really aggressively. Even if it seemed that Wolves had a lot of the possession in the early minutes of the game, I think that Chelsea started with some aggression, started getting at Wolves when they were trying to build that from the back. Initially, they would try to step up and be aggressive 1 versus 1 all over the pitch. Of course, this is something that we've come to know Chelsea for. And what's impressive about this is that look at this Wolves build up in the early minutes of the game. Look at where Chelsea's backline is. All 10 outfield players for Chelsea are inside Wolves' half. That's 10 of them. And really putting pressure on Wolves, giving them no time or space to build up. And what this helps Chelsea to do is that once they are able to win the ball deep inside Wolves' half, they can immediately then be on the attack. And this is what happens on this occasion. Once that ball is won, Chelsea has 4 or 5 players immediately running at Wolves' back line. Now, I think in the early minutes of the game, Wolves were the team that settled into the game first. Of course, I expected that. They are the home team, but Chelsea did seize control of the game at some point. Now, putting that aggression aside, there were a few things that I was particularly impressed with when I was looking at Chelsea in this game. Some relationships that are starting to build, probably because some players are getting to play together with each other more. For instance, look at this relationship in that Chelsea's midfield. Of course, we are all very familiar with the box structure that Chelsea likes to progress with in midfield. And in this game against Wolves, Chelsea were not traditionally building with 3 centre backs and then 2 pivots as we are used to them doing. The only time they built with 3 at the back is if they are building very deep and Sanchez joins the 2 centre backs. What we saw mostly was these 4 players here, which is the 2 centre backs, Fofana and Chaloba, and then with Andre Santos and Caicedo just in front of them. And they were always able to find gaps to move themselves around to make sure that they are not pinned down. And then oftentimes you have Enzo Fernandez or Kopama dropping in, finding space in between to receive the ball. And then, of course, Wolves, on the other hand, tried to go a little bit deeper and try to squeeze the middle as well to prevent those Chelsea pivots and the 2 Chelsea number 10s from actually getting on the ball. But I don't think that worked very well, just because of the relationship between Kopama, Enzo Fernandez, Caicedo, and even Andre Santos. This is what I'm talking about. This is the 3 of them there in that Wolves midfield. But a lot of times in this game, I saw this very clever interplay between the 3 of them where they can just rotate the ball as they've done on this occasion, get themselves out of the trap that Wolves are set in the middle. On this occasion, Enzo Fernandez was able to send Joao Pedro through, but I think the pass was a little bit overcooked. So Joao Pedro couldn't get on the end of it, but you get what I'm trying to say. And then talking about those relationships as well. In the build-up to Chelsea's goals, had a big role to play. The stats will not favour him, but having a ball-carrying centre-back is a plus for any team. And that is what Enzo Maresca was crying about when he was in Chelsea. Look at the build-up to the penalty that led to Chelsea's first goal. Now, in this phase of play, this is basically Chelsea trying to build out from the back again. And then they formed that back 3 with Sanchez stepping in between the 2 centre-backs. And then there's that midfield pivot of Caicedo and Andre Santos. But now, of course, as we've seen previously, Wolves have committed players forward, tried to have a go at Chelsea, trying to press high up the pitch. And then this ball comes out wide to Fofana. Now, Fofana could have picked the easy pass to Malo Gusto here, but he doesn't do that. He picks what I believe is the more difficult pass. He plays that line-breaking pass forward. And this is something that I want you to keep an eye on here. Of course, he plays that line-breaking pass forward. And then once Pedro Neto is 1v1 with his man, as you would expect a good winger to do who is not Garnacho, he's able to take on his man, win that individual battle, and then put the ball into the middle of the box, Pedro. And of course, I think Wolves probably would have had this content, but the defender decided to do something silly here, and Chelsea got that penalty. That was the penalty that led to Chelsea's first goal. But see the other goal that Chelsea scored again, and see Fofana's role in that goal. Now, look at Cope's third goal, and then this is Chelsea's build-up again. And of course, as we described in the first, it's still the same setup, the 3 with Sanchez dropping in and then the two double pivots. Now, of course, Wolves have poured players forward to try to contain Chelsea, to try to press on the front foot. Now, normally, you would think that there is not a lot of space. Santos drifts into that space, receives the ball, lays it off to Fofana. And now, once Fofana has this ball, again, he didn't pick the easy pass. He didn't turn back to his goalkeeper. He just picked that line-breaking pass once again straight to Pedro Neto. On this time, Pedro Neto was able to roll his marker and send the ball out wide, and then instantly get Chelsea going. And Chelsea were able to have a 4 versus 3 in this attack with Kukureya basically just underlapping and finding space. And once he receives this ball and squares it back to Kopama, he squares it back to Kopama, and then Palmer could apply that finish. But the key thing in this pass, the key thing in this move that I want us to keep an eye on is this pass from Fofana. This is the reason why Maresca was screaming for a ball carrying centre back. Now imagine that on the other side again, instead of, well, Chalobah is decent on the ball, but imagine that on the other side again, Chelsea had a fit Levi Colwill. It will be difficult to contain Chelsea, to prevent Chelsea from actually leaving their own half because of defenders who are able to pick passes and play the ball forward. I just thought this happened in this game twice, and it's worth pointing out. And then let us also look at the relationship on the wings between Malo Gusto and Pedro Neto, because I think that rotation between the two of them and Gusto's positioning created issues for Wolves as well. See what I'm talking about? Now, in this phase of play for Chelsea, I want you to keep an eye on where Malo Gusto is. Of course, is that Chelsea diamond in midfield, and Malo Gusto is just on the right side of it. And then they're basically keeping Wolves pinned in the middle. Now, when the ball comes to Malo Gusto, I think Mosquera was the first person to step out to Malo Gusto on this occasion, and then the ball goes out wide. Now, look at the position of Malo Gusto, look at the position of Pedro Neto. Mosquera is on Gusto, he's marking him. But have a look at the clever movement between those two players. What you would notice now is that they have rotated positions. Neto has moved inward, Gusto has moved outwards. Look at Mosquera there too. At this point now, I think Mosquera is a little bit now confused that he doesn't know who he's marking anymore. He's standing there. He's basically not picking anybody. He's basically confused now. He doesn't know who he's picking up again. And then Malo Gusto immediately sourced that gap behind him and sourced the fact that Mosquera has completely forgotten about him. That rotation, again, don't get me wrong, it is poor defending from that defender. It is absolutely shitty defending. I'm not making any excuse for him. But once Gusto sourced that gap, he goes in there and duly receives the ball. And then he was able to put a cross in. Chelsea did not score from that. But look at another example of that clever movement again. Now, again, I want you to keep an eye on, in this phase of play, keep an eye on where Malo is and keep an eye on where Pedro Neto is. And then Mosquera, as in the first clip, supposedly is keeping an eye on Gusto. But what happens there is that Mosquera is supposed to be on Gusto. Gusto has returned the ball to midfield, and he has cleverly walked behind Mosquera on this occasion. Now, from where Pedro Neto receives this ball from here, Gusto has moved infield, positioned himself in that Chelsea attacking line inside of Mosquera. And I think what happens here again is that he got both sides of Mosquera. Mosquera didn't even notice. And then once this ball is played through, Gusto had a free run at goal. And although I think he made a bad decision here, though, he could have squared that ball to Palmer, but he decided to go himself. But again, it is that movement between Gusto and Neto that I'm just trying to emphasize. And I hope that even if it's James that comes into this setup, James is also able to build the same relationship with Neto and move, because I think that Chelsea's right-hand side is the only one functioning properly. On the left-hand side, there is no appropriate winger there. I think Cucurella is the only one who runs that wing by himself. If you put Garnacho or any of those 1,000 left wingers that Chelsea has, they are basically non-functional. But again, that's just my brief tactical insight into the game. If there's anything else you noticed in the game that is interesting, please leave it in the comments. I always like to have tactical discussions, and this is what we do on this channel. So if it appeals to you, please hit the like button, hit the follow button. If you are following already, please support the channel, hit the share button. It helps me keep the channel growing. See you on the next one.